it's really difficult, isn't it, when we try to pinpoint who the Roma are, because we've got Gypsy, we've got Roma, we've got Traveller. Now, I was born and brought up in England, and my family goes back hundreds of years, and we were just known as travellers, really, within our group. And then the word Gypsy, my dad didn't really like it. I'm not bothered about the word Gypsy, I quite like it. There's a lot of positive things around it, but some negatives as well.
I grew up hearing within my own family that we are Roma, right? This is part of our language. This is how we call ourselves. Rom means human being.
Whereabouts is that, though, in Eastern Europe, where you grew up?
I grew up in Hungary myself, but my family, they were traveling, right? They were travelers as well. We were forced to settle roughly a century ago, I would say. But before that, we would travel, from Russia to Serbia. But then the great-grandparents used to be, and their ancestors used to be slaves, proper slaves, in Romania for 5 centuries. And the word gypsy there was used as slave. So there were the gypsy laws, which meant slave laws. So for us, the term gypsy has a really bad connotation.
History of Roma, or Romani people, as we would say in England, goes back to 1515. So that's when we start coming into England. And King Henry VIII thought we were Egyptians, so he called us Egyptians. But he got a bit bored of us by 1530 and brought out the first anti-gypsy law, which was called the Egyptians Act, which meant that he wanted all our people to be banished. No more people could come in. But, we're masters of survival, so we just go off, and here we are. 500 years later, we're still here.
Our ancestors used to live in the north of India, scattered throughout the north. So present-day Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, these areas primarily. But we were persecuted from these territories. It was Mahmud of Ghazni. He invaded northern parts of territory and enslaved people living there and sold them as slaves as well. So people were running away, and there were several groups of migration leaving the northern part of India. And then some of us stayed in the territories, but most of us would always leave. And why? Because we never belonged anywhere. Our history started with persecution. And I think that's the key. We've never made welcome anywhere, and we never felt that we belong anywhere.
So we come from the same place, you and I. And you come into England 500 years later than me. We've been here since that time. Yet, when we talk about other Gypsy Roma people, they're traveling across the edge of Egypt, and they're going into North Africa, and then they get into Morocco, and then they're going across into Spain. And hence we've got that beautiful flamenco, and we've got the Hindi dance movements in that dance. So that's all connected, isn't it? And that fascinates me. It's really interesting to me when we look at our joint history. And I have a photograph at home, which is a family photograph, and it has Roma people. It's 100 years old, and it has Roma people have come into this country from Belgium, and they're being escorted out of this country by the police. And that's 100 years ago. So, I think Roma people have been coming in for a long time. But you talked about you coming in here 9 years ago, but you've got 100 years history of Roma people coming in.
The vast majority of Roma, I think, though, came into the country over the last decade or 2 decades, really, since some of the Eastern European countries joined the European Union back in 2004 and then later. And then a vast number of communities started coming here in hope of a better life, of a better future. I think every coin has 2 sides, right? And where I come from Eastern Europe, unfortunately, it was the negative side of the coin that was most of the time visible in our life. And in the UK, I think I get to discover more about my own identity by encountering people from India and Pakistan and learning about the similarities. So I go deeper with my own identity, understanding who I am and where I'm coming from. And also here, I think we get more freedom than back in Central and Eastern Europe. And I think every Roma family loves that here. I grew up with lots of poverty, really. Many of us were starving, and also we were being hated by the outsiders wherever we were living. So the only joy we had was singing and dancing, right? But then when that's your only thing, then you're gonna make it as good as you can. So we were singing and dancing day and night growing up, right? And you see that in every single Roma family, right? And there's been a very long tradition of singing and dancing and passing that on to the next generations. And we compete. It's a constant competition, and it never stops, right? Who's got a better song? Who's got better lyrics? Who's got better moves? Yeah, and who's more rhythmic than the other? And it's a constant competition that goes on day and night. And it's not just between individuals. No, it's in between families. That's your pride.
Is that our way of communicating, though? You know, I'm thinking about growing up with people who, you know, maybe could read and write a little bit, but not very well, and maybe some of them couldn't, but never learned because of being nomadic. But they could all sing, and they could all tell a story. And you'd sit around at night, and I remember being a baby, you know, the earliest memories you can remember of people singing. And there'd always be somebody, and they'd say, well, give us a song, give us a song. But I think when TVs came out in the 1970s in England, and a lot of gypsy people, they were forced to move into housing, and a lot of that singing around the fire stopped.
One very important rule about gypsy songs is that you always need to dedicate it to somebody. It's not just there. It's not just hanging there in the air. You know, it has a specific role, right? A very specific aim, right? And that's, you say it and sing it, right?
And it's not just for money. It's not just for money or for fame or whatever. It's to share with people from here to here.
Well, actually, that's within my community, you know, it has always been very problematic having Roma musicians, you know, because you don't do it for money, right? This is absolutely all about respect, about nothing else.